Good evening and welcome everybody to our webinar on Dolby Atmos music production. I'm very happy to be joined here by Harald Gericke from Platin Media Productions in Germany. My name is David Ziegler from Dolby Germany, working from Berlin. And Harald will tell us a lot about a recent production that he worked on in Dolby Atmos from the artist Schiller, German electronic music artist, which he mixed in Dolby Atmos using Merging Pyramix. After the session, we will have a Q&A. You have a chat window, a chat function in your webinar client, so you have the opportunity to post any questions in the chat, and I will see them. And some questions I might answer directly using the text function, and for the other questions, we will collect them and address them afterwards in the Q&A. So at the end of the webinar, we have that Q&A session. Looking forward to this webinar with you. Before I hand it over to Harald, we will have a few slides about the basics of Dolby Atmos music. So just that you have a basic understanding what we are talking about here, and then most of the time Harald will be talking about this individual project and his workflow and his work. So Harald, I hope you can see my slides. So that would mean everybody can see my slides. Good. So with Dolby Atmos music, we worked on creating a ecosystem about bringing a new dimension to music reproduction. So creating an ecosystem basically means talking to all the persons in the chain. So we're talking to music creation, we're more talking about music distribution, and we're talking about playback experience. So having devices where people can experience music in Dolby Atmos. Obviously, we are right now talking about the creation side of things. So on the left side, so we are talking to sound studios, to sound mixers, artists, and labels to make sure that content is produced using the three-dimensional sound format of Dolby Atmos. Then this content needs to be distributed, and this is where the streaming services come into play. And then, of course, we need playback devices. And the good thing about this is that Dolby Atmos has been a thing for quite a long time. So there are actually billions of Dolby Atmos enabled devices in the market that have been around for Hollywood titles and for streaming services, so for all kinds of things. And now these devices can also be used to experience music in Dolby Atmos on them. So just a brief overview. So we're working with a lot of partners, big labels, small labels, independent labels throughout the world that are committed on mixing music in Dolby Atmos. And this is just a small overview of artists that have already produced content in Dolby Atmos, including a lot of very famous top 10 artists that currently have top selling music. And it's also a lot of catalog artists. So there is also quite a lot of interest of taking old favorite albums and remixing them, making a new mix in Dolby Atmos from old albums. So this is just a little overview. And obviously this music is experienced on streaming services, which are Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Tidal. Just so that you have a basic idea. So if you mix music in Dolby Atmos, you will be able to stream that music through these services. In addition to actually also, it's actually also available on Blu-ray. So for example, the Schiller production we're talking about now is was actually released on Blu-ray. So people can buy a Blu-ray and watch it in their living room in Dolby Atmos. Just a quick overview of devices where people can experience Dolby Atmos. So we do have smart speakers. We have mobile phones where people can listen to Dolby Atmos music in immersive Atmos. So you hear a virtualization on your headphones. We have PCs and laptops where you can listen to Dolby Atmos. And obviously we are very present in the living room. So there are countless sound bars, televisions, home theater systems where you can listen to Dolby Atmos. So as I said before, we have quite a wide range of devices where people can actually listen to your music. Before we hand it over to Harald, just a very quick thing, because I'm talking about Atmos all the time. What actually is Dolby Atmos? So what is actually the difference of Dolby Atmos compared to stereo and 5.1? I guess most of the people in this webinar probably know about it, but just to bring everybody to the same page, Dolby Atmos is an immersive sound format. So we have an overhead component. So that means you can hear music coming from all directions. So you have 3 dimensions to position your music in space. And Harald will, of course, tell us a lot about how to use these 3 dimensions. And the other very important thing about Dolby Atmos is if you're mixing Dolby Atmos, you're working with the so-called audio objects. So that means you position sound in the room. You're mixing 2 positions in the room instead of 2 physical speakers. So you no longer say, like in 5.1, I want to have something coming from the right surround speaker. No, you say, I want something to coming from this area of the room. And our software is smart enough to position your sounds at that exact location in the room. So you're kind of mixing freely from the constraints of traditional speaker layouts, which is a very flexible way of working. So if you're mixing for an object, you basically take a sound and you give it a coordinate. You position it on the y-axis, on the x-axis, and on the z-axis. So you position it in 3-dimensional space, and you can also give it a size. You can make it bigger. And with these coordinates and the size, you are basically able to address any position in your room, and you just have your music expanding to these 3 dimensions with this technology. So you can use it to reproduce a room. You can basically just have reverbs and room information coming from the overhead channels as if you would be in a concert hall. You can also use it more experimentally with synthesizers. You can just have sounds moving around you. You can have clouds of sound that are really expanding around you. So a lot of creative possibilities, and I think Harald will tell us a lot more about how to use it creatively. So I just end at this point with this little QR code, which will bring you to a landing page from Dolby. You can also go and type in dolby.com/music/create. This is a little website that will bring you to a lot of resources to further dig into that subject. You can actually download the software that you need to create Atmos. It's a little piece of software which you can get a 90 days trial for free. You will get some get started videos, so you know actually about the basics of session setup and how to get your project ready. And it will have some additional resources like some more webinars and masterclasses. So feel free to check that out. Obviously not now, please wait until we're done here. So that's it from my side. I'm just stop here. And I'm handing over to Harald. Let's see, switching over here.
It looks good.
So your workstation computer should now be ready. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay,
Perfect.
so Harald, I think you can probably introduce yourself a little bit more. I just told your name and the name of your studio, your company, but probably you can talk a little bit more about your background and then obviously about this project. So.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here for you and presenting a little bit of my mixing work I did for the Schiller project. My name is Harald Gericke. I'm running a authoring, mixing, mastering studio here near Hannover in Germany, which is called Platin Media Productions. And it has been started as part of Emil Berliner Studios, the huge recording center of Deutsche Grammophon, 15 years or 18 years ago, where I started building up a department inside Emil Berliner Studios, which was responsible for everything which was newer than CD. So we started at that time with DVD audio when that starts into the market. We also did SACD, we did enhanced parts for CD-ROMs, and of course, later on DVD, video, Blu-ray, UHD, all that stuff, and mostly focused on the music industry. So we are working for huge and smaller labels like Sony Classical and Sony Music, where the Schiller has been released, Universal Music, Warner, or also some smaller labels from artists of classic, rock, pop, jazz, doesn't matter. So some of our main work really is the authoring side. But I studied sound engineer and Tonmeister in Germany, and of course my main focus is still the audio. Yes, and before we start with the project and with some hopefully interesting information about what I did during the mixing session and what we discussed before this with the artist, I just want to quickly go through some, let's say, workflow and setup things which should be done working with Pyramix and to create Dolby format files. So what we need, of course, is the Dolby renderer from Dolby, which is running on Mac computers. Or if you go for the Dolby Atmos mastering suite, you also have the chance for a huge system running on a PC. But we are fine here with the renderer on the Mac. And the Pyramix is running on a Windows 10 PC. It's an 8-core, 16-thread machine, which is running Pyramix as our main workstation. We also have some others running here for compatibility issues, but most of our job is done on Pyramix here for audio. For creating an Atmos file or file set at the end, David mentioned that we have objects and channel-based information. So we of course need to fed all those audio streams from the workstation into the renderer. And this could be done with up to 128 tracks, which contains 118 object tracks, as well as 10 tracks for the so-called 712 bed, which is part of that Atmos format. And all those audio connection is done here via audio over IP in my studio. So we're using Ravenna technology for all audio connections. So on the PC, we have the new Merging Audio Device driver running, which is an ASIO driver, which could be used by Pyramix, but as well as by other applications on the system talking ASIO. The interesting thing about it is that it also can bridge into WDM for some Windows software which is not working with ASIO. So this could be used as an I/O for those applications as well, which could be found later on in the Pyramix workstation on the I/Os. And it also has another bridging functionality for a second ASIO application running at the same time. So you can configure 10, 18, 20 tracks for bridging, and for example, a Reaper could be run there, or some kind of a synth system could be run there and fed the audio data directly into Pyramix, all done in the Merging Audio Device driver here. So the tracks would be fed audio-wise through the switch into the Dolby renderer. The way back for listening purposes from the Dolby renderer, which features the 714 speaker setup, what we are running here in the studio, as well as down mixes, as well as a binaural stereo down mix for headphone. All those information would be fed back from the renderer, could be recorded on Pyramix, or mainly is used for monitoring here. And the Anubis controller is used in here for all the source selection and so on, muting, all that stuff. And we have an merging harpy running here as an ADDA for getting the signals to the loudspeakers. The monitoring system, the Anubis, is quite interesting. It's an audio over IP device. It has just a few analog inputs and outputs, just for ins and for outs, plus 2 headphone outs, but it is capable of handling 256 channels of audio over IP audio in and out. So we can configure many sources into the into the system. This is the web GUI, which you can use to mute or solo, dedicated speakers, select your sources, which also could be done directly on the hardware device. But this web page is interesting also to be run on an iPad or a tablet. So you have that as a dedicated system for soloing and muting, which is quite handy. It is coming with some predefined Atmos setups for the different speaker sets. So it's quickly set up, and it also features some EQing and delay and trimming for your speaker setup in the studio if this is necessary. Besides all the audio information, you have seen that also some control information like XYZ coordinates and the size of a audio source has to be defined. And this is done in the workstation using the panner, but this data needs to be fed into the renderer. And this is done through a dedicated network in our case normally. So we have a studio network with no connection to the internet where all the machines are connected to each other, and that is normally used for the metadata. So audio via audio over IP, and all the coordinates and metadata is set through a dedicated network. When you connect the Pyramix to the Atmos renderer, you have a dedicated Atmos Connect dialog in the mixer page. And in there, you just have to type in the IP of your renderer, which would be shown by the renderer itself. So you do not need any network knowledge to get this done. Just type the IP, which is shown on the GUI of the Atmos renderer, and then you can connect. And when it connects, it lets the Atmos renderer know what kind of audio channels are fed into the renderer, and also gets information from the renderer like object naming and something like this. So you see those kind of names in the configure dialogues of Pyramix as well. And what David mentioned as well, you can set up coordinates for the XYZ coordinates to place an object in the room, but you also can define the size. And this is done in the panel. We will see this later on in the project as well. And the size, the divergence you can set up here will also be sent to the renderer, getting the information over to it that it is just not a small ball, but a larger ball of audio source. Besides of the connection of metadata and audio, it's also necessary to get an timecode information into the renderer, that you get the workstation and the renderer synced to each other, which is mainly important when you work with video, that you get correct start and end points and stuff like this. And for the creation of the Atmos stream, which is a real-time playout process, you can set up in an out point in the renderer. So the start and end of the recording is done automatically, and therefore you need the Htc Track to get this information into the system. We will have a quick look into the project here after I told you a little bit about the project we worked on. So David mentioned it was Schiller. This is the artist here in Germany, which is an electronic music artist, and he released this box set, which is a double CD, double Blu-ray box set containing its actual album on CD, and the Blu-rays feature a bunch of additional concerts, like the live recording of his last concert of the last tour. There was some additional concert during Corona here, which has been done in summer last year, which was filmed. And besides some little video clips and some bonus material, Christopher, so Schiller decided to create 2 additional concerts without audience due to the Corona situation. And one was done in a club in Berlin together with Thomas Questioning, and the other was done in his loft, and that was done with 2 additional keyboard players. And that's the one I did the Atmos mix for. And as we are working on his DVDs and Blu-rays since many years, I have a good connection to Christopher, and we started discussing this project due to the authoring work. And during that process, Christopher decided that this Berlin-Moskau concert should be mixed and recorded in Atmos. And that was really interesting. It was a dedicated concert he did of his track, which is it's an older track he played long years ago, also on all the concerts. And he made a special arrangement for this with quite 50 minutes length and with a huge laser show. So that one was filmed, and that's the concert we are going through here to have a look what I did. An important part in the preparation, talking with the artists or other responsible audio people, is to decide what kind of material they can hand over to you. It depends a bit on the project itself, on the workflow. In this case, we had 3 real-time or live tracks from the keyboarders and a huge bunch of additional synth tracks and stuff like this. And all those tracks came to us as stereo tracks. Some of them with reverb integrated, some of them were dry. The most important is that we get at least as many single sources as possible. So we could handle them independently as objects or as part of the mix, but can position them where we want to, can create its own reverb for the 3D scenery. And yeah, this is something what you really need to discuss with the artist before the project starts, that they are aware of what to deliver. It's not done with a 5.1 mix and that should be blown up into the Atmos. That makes no sense. So getting a huge bunch of files is fine, and as more dry files you will get, as better in normal cases, because then you can handle all the reverb delay stuff on your own. So when we have a look to the project itself, we can just see what kind of material came in here. So first of all, we have the video reference here, which is part of one of the tracks of the ADL, and could be fed through a Blackmagic card out to a video reference monitor we have here in the studio. So video check and video sync and all that is possible. Then when we have a look to the tracks, first of all, we got some drum stuff, which is not so much stuff. It was a bass, a snare, some hi-hat stuff, and a little bit of claps, which was dedicated, let's say, drums. And then we had a few tracks of bass signals, sequences, and loops. Additional pads, additional sequencer tracks. You can see some of them playing very often, some of them just for a short moment. Sometimes just a track is used for half a minute, others are used for all the time. This orange one, for example, is Christopher's live track from the concert. So this is running through the whole time. And yeah, it is filled up with more single sounds, with the 2 tracks of Robin and Cedric, the other 2 keyboard players. And at the beginning, we have some opening audio here. It was an opening sequence showing some night shots of Berlin and Moscow with some ambience and birds, whispers, and all that stuff. So this is just part of this opening. And of course, we have the stereo reference. So the final mix, which was done by Christopher himself, has been used as a reference track here. So we could switch between our Atmos mix and the stereo to compare if we are as punchy as the stereo, if it sounds very similar, and so on and so on. So it is that's a good choice to have the stereo available for reference as well. And then here at the bottom, we have this Htc Track, which is used, as I said before, for getting the information of timecode into the renderer. Well, we will have a look to the mixer. I just pull it up from here, so I'm working with more screens than just one. So I'm just moving windows around here. What we've seen in the EDL mostly corresponds to the mixer as well. We have some additional tracks I've created in advance to be able to maybe, if necessary, fed a dedicated surround signal or immersive signal if available, but that wasn't used. So it's starting here with bass drum and the drum signals with all the sequences. And you can see here, I haven't done a lot of processing because, as I said, Christopher did the stereo mix, and we get mostly finely processed files, which includes all EQing and compression and stuff like this, which is a very good way to work, in my opinion, because you don't have to care about a first kind of sound you have to create before you start thinking about your immersive mix. So therefore, we don't have done a lot of additional processing. We have a little bit, little EQ here on the bass drum just to push a little bit the low end of the kick, and I think there was a high shelf on the hi-hat. But that's it, mostly for the processing of sources as they were fine as they came in. I also mixed on other projects where we also made the recording of a huge percussion ensemble, for example, and then you can imagine all the tracks were filled up with a bunch of plugins. And I have to say, I haven't expected the issue of processing power needed for those kind of projects, especially if you're working with multi-channel plugins on the buses and so on. That needs a lot of processing power, so it's fine if you get finally processed files, or normally you would have to do some kind of bouncing before starting the 3D mix because of having enough power for the processing of the mixing for 3D. You can see here is the panner available in the mixer, which shows all the positions. It's a 3D panner which has a size into the upper area, and of course this let's say surround field, which is a 7.1 here, what we're using. And if we have a look more to this is all the input files we have. At the end, we also have a few reverb tracks, which we will have a closer look at the end, and some buses, what we are using for example here an additional bus for the drums to get an additional processing. And what can be what you also have to take care of is the routing into the Atmos renderer. And David mentioned we have this bed and we have objects to handle. And first of all, the Atmos format offers a 7.1.2 bed, and a lot of music Atmos mixes are done in 7.1.4 or maybe 7.1.6 or 9.1.6. So we have to think about how to handle the additional height channels, which are not part of the bed, for those parts of the mix which are not used as a dedicated object. In Pyramix, I can just set up a 7.1.4 master bus, and could be also done a 9.1.6, that's no problem. And the routing of the Pyramix is done here below this area, and you can see it shows you the names of the bed channels of the Atmos renderer. And it's not only that we have the 7.1.2 from the renderer, but it's also that we have a 7.1.4 here. So the additional 4 height channels are routed into dedicated tracks. So there is no need for extra quad buses you have to prepare in Pro Tools, for example, to get this height channels done. So the whole bus bandwidth of the Pyramix can run up to 30.2 internally, so it's no problem to run 714 or 916 as a final bus format here, and that is used for some part of my main mix, which features more or less all the tracks without additional reverb. I created another 714 master bus only for the effects, for the reverbs, and I think 1 or 2 dedicated sources which have been fed directly in here. This is also set up as a 714 and is routed into the renderer directly from Pyramix here. And the routing is done in Pyramix in the mixer in this upper part, and Pyramix can route the signals coming in here from the tracks to many buses at the same time. So I can route this file into the 714. I can route it also into a stereo, or maybe into a dedicated 5.1 mix I want to create. I also could add additional panner buses. So even the panner is handled as a bus, and I can create in this mixer strip a 714 panner and also a stereo panner. Then I can select here which kind of panner should be used for this kind of bus, which you can see is the stereo here, and the blue one is our 714, and we have the bus for the FX. On these little icons here, you can see the routing into the objects. So if you want to create an object in Pyramix, you have to create an object bus to get those signals fed into the renderer. The difference to many other workstations here is that, as you can see, I have a object bus which has a size of 16 channels. So this is different compared to other workstations where you only can send the stereo and the surround into the renderer, track by track. In Pyramix, you create this object buses. This can of course be a stereo or a mono bus if you like, but it also could be a 16-channel bus like that one, and I think this is an 8-channel bus. And then you also have the routing here, where you can, as we did it for the other tracks, where you can route the signals to dedicated, let's say, channels in the renderer, which afterwards will then be used as an object. So this makes it very handy, because with a little click on this green button here, I can activate or deactivate this object track. So if this is active, all the signals which are defined as an object here in the mixer would be fed into the renderer, including the metadata for panning and size information. If you deactivate this object bus, the signal runs into the normal bus where it is routed, which could be the 714. So you have the chance to create a channel-based 714 mix in the Pyramix, as well as a object-based Atmos mix from the same project, and you do not have to activate or deactivate 118 tracks separately, but you just can create a few larger object buses and can handle it this way. So this is very handy. And another very interesting use case for this larger bus size on the objects is that you can use multi-channel plugins in there for processing. So when you do this, you have the chance to do some kind of dynamic processing on all the object tracks which are part of that bus. And in this case, one object is triggering, for example, the compressor, and all the other channels would be processed accordingly to the setting. So there is a chance of some kind of, let's say, mastering or final tweaking of the object buses, which would be hard to realize in other systems. That could be really useful And as well, those kind of multi-channel buses could be used for creating subgroups, like for drums or for bass signals or guitars, keyboards, whatever, depending on your mix you're working on. It is quite useful to use those kind of additional processing here.
I think this was in the past very often asked about kind of mastering, using mastering workflows in Dolby Atmos. So this is very interesting. So did you use this on this specific production, and for what instruments?
I haven't used it here because most of the files were fine with the dynamics, but I have done another mixing project where I had, I think, 4 or 5 dedicated subgroups, which are also 714. So I'm mixing maybe the drums into a subgroup or the guitars into a subgroup, and then I can run a compressor and a final EQ, for example, on this full bus. And it's not only a stereo, but it's also a 714 bus, and that one is routed at the end, maybe all 12 tracks as an object or as dedicated objects, or would be routed as a subgroup into the master bus and going into the renderer from that case. And what I use for those kind of processing is the Evo channel from Flux. I was looking for plugins which could handle more than 8 tracks. There are a few plugins out there which can handle 8 tracks. There are another few which can handle 712. So although most of the plugin manufacturers focus on this bed format 714, like FabFilter, they did a compressor, and I think the limiter as well, which is able to process 712, but it is not doing 714. So this Evo channel is running up to 16 channel internally, so it is also able to handle the 916. And you have an EQ here, you have a compressor, and you have some kind of tool which could do de-essing or transient boosting or decreasing. So it's a quite nice plugin, sounding very fine, and could be used for those purposes. What I haven't found so far, and I would be lucky if anyone can let me know if that is available, I don't find any kind of limiter which is running in 714 or at least 916. So for a final limiting at the end, you try to figure out what to do. In this case here, I run an Elixir on the 7.1 lower bass channels, and no limiting on the height channels, because I know that they are not as loud as the rest of the signals, so that wasn't a problem. And the Elixir was only used to cover some decreasing of peaks, so it was not used for additional increasing of levels. It was only a real true peak limiter. But I'm looking into any kind of 16-channel limiter that would be really useful, because side chaining is not possible in Pyramix based on the architecture. Other workstations can do side chaining, but it's not quite comfortable in my opinion. And I also have written to a bunch of the manufacturers asking them for limiters in 16 channel, but yeah, it's not their focus right now. Let's see what's coming in there. If you know anything, just let me know, please. So this one is used on the master bus here as well, as I also could use it on some of the subgroups if they are in use. When we will have a look to the panning I did, it is most of the signals are having a fixed position, and a lot of those are part of this let's say 714 main mix, and I haven't used all the dedicated channels as objects. It's only used in those cases where, first of all, I want to do some kind of movement of the source, or where I had the feeling that a dedicated setup of binaural rendering data for headphone playback could be useful. That's a second reason why you could use objects instead of having a signal as a part of the main mix. It is important to know that the Atmos stream also contains additional information for binaural rendering. So the 714 or 916 mix or whatever you did in the studio could be used in a binaural version for headphone and let's say mobile listening. So all the streaming services so far offer those binaural files, and then you can listen to this kind of immersive mix through your headphone. It could be on the mobile device, as David mentioned before. It could be also done on computers or whatever. So
yes,
you have the chance.
mostly it's in Windows 10 devices and in a lot of mobile devices. So a lot of Android tablets, Android phones, they have the special engine built in.
Yeah, and we will have a look to this in the renderer later on, that you can do some kind of dedicated settings for this binaural rendering mode. And due to the fact that even each single object can have its independent setting, it is useful to create a source as an object, because it could be handled that way. If you just create a 714 fixed channel based mix, of course you can do so, and of course you can feed this into an Atmos stream to create the Atmos signal. But for loudspeaker presentation on the dedicated format like a 714, this should be fine. For everything else, also for down mixing to 512 maybe, or even 51, it could be useful having more objects and let the renderer at the end in the AVR do the positioning of sources based on the speaker setup the end consumer has at home running to listen to the immersive audio. So what we did here is most of the stuff is on a dedicated fixed position. The drums normally I will do as a front information, like bass drum, snare, hi-hat. That's still, even if you are sitting in the environment of 3D audio, the drums is a part of audio which in my opinion is fine in the front, as you know where it normally is placed. Maybe some additional signals. The claps, for example, have been positioned a little bit to the left and center side of the listening environment here. I also placed the bass signals in the front. What I try to not to do is placing signals on the listening position, because in that case it is coming from all speakers, and that can cause some kind of trouble in regards to phasing and stuff like this. So I prefer not having the same signal played on all speakers. So trying to get it placed on the outer circle of your environment is a good idea to start. Some signals may be fine to use like this, and even if you move a signal through the listening room, it's okay to do so, but normally it's good to have it on the outer side of your listening circle, let's say it this way. Here we have a signal which is some kind of this click which should be placed in the rear, and it was interesting when we started discussing with Christopher what to do in this production. It was done before he started arranging the tracks for his concerts. So during the arrangement for his tracks, he knew that it should be mixed in immersive audio. So he could take care of this, and he also had some ideas where some sources should be positioned. So some of those sources have been placed on the rear or in the top, because that was his intention. On the other hand, he left me all freedom for trying out what was fine to me. So it was a huge experiment here as well, to try to figure out how sound sources could be used with movements, without movements, with positioning the files, and so yeah, that was quite interesting to handle and to learn what is possible.
A brief update is that we only have like 8 minutes left before we want to go to the Q&A.
Yeah, so I think regarding panning, there's something which could be quite interesting. We had a source which is also used on his during his concerts, which is of course a stereo source as well, but during his concerts he also is doing some kind of surround PAing the environment. So some of his concert visitors know that there are sources moving around the scene, and that's what we want to do here as well. And we got the stereo signal of this main sequencer here, and that should be moved around. And Pyramix also has some kind of rotation feature here in its panel, but when you see what is done when I try to rotate the stereo source, it's rotating through its center position. So it is not rotating through the room. So what I did here is I created a dedicated track, which is called a subgroup, which is track rotate. And I fed the signal here just as a stereo front fixed position signal to this channel here. And that channel then can use the rotation feature for creating this rotation around the audience from the stereo source. So sometimes you just need to think how you can realize a result which is not possible with the normal tools. Just thinking a little bit around, and then you could get some kind of those ideas using this dedicated subgroup here. So this was the only signal which was rooted in this subgroup for the rotation. Other signals which I worked on have been used for positioning in the room or for make the source larger as it was in original. I was using Halo Upmix. It's a quite cool tool which tries to extract, let's say, room information from a stereo signal and use this to enlarge the space in which the file is played without adding a lot of additional reverb, something like this. So it's using content of the signal itself for creating this result. And if this is used, let me find a position where you, oh, it's something is solo here. So if you fed a signal into the Halo Upmix, you can set up how much of the signal should be placed in the rear and also in the top using dedicated settings for the plugin. What you also can see here, what I don't like in most cases, is how the stereo source is leaving the plugin. So you feed in left and right channel, and of course you will get out in 714 at the end, or 712. And I normally don't use the left-right output. You can create a center signal with this, quite nice if necessary. But in this case here, I just used it for creating surround and height information and not using the 3 front speakers and the LFE. So a signal which is fed into the Halo Upmix is also fed directly to the bus, not to lose the source, but it's using this kind of upmix technology for getting larger sources. Yeah, of course, we need to think and talk about reverb. When doing 3D mixing, of course, you are thinking about different kind of reverb using for those mixes instead of stereo. So of course you can work with single stereo reverbs to get this to use those as a let's say 3D room information at the end. So this is done here as well. I used the Seventh Heaven stereo plugin just for the 3 tracks of the soloists, for the live tracks, to create some additional room information this way. And one of the reverbs is penned more or less to the midth of the room with a little bit of height information, and the second one is used for the rear channels in a 50% height situation. And in a lot of cases, I'm using quite small, roomy kind of information here. And the difference between the settings of the two positions is only the kind of pre-delay you're applying to the plugin. So the pre-delay is the only parameter that is changed. So you have the chance of working with reverbs, standard stereo reverbs in multiple instances. Of course, you have the chance to use some kind of delay, like the eventide or any other kind of delay where you can create dedicated delay lines for dedicated speakers. And what I really like to use, especially for large rooms and for lushy reverbs, that's the Symphony 3D from Exponential Audio, which is nowadays a part of the Isotope group. And the Symphony 3D is a real immersive reverb. So it has up to, I think, 24 channels in and 24 channels out. So in this case, it is running on a 714 bus. So it creates a 714 signal as an output signal. And the interesting thing of it is that due to the fact that it is also fed by a 714 input, a dedicated source, which maybe is placed on the rear top, also feds the input of the reverb at the rear top, and not only on the front. If you're working with a stereo reverb, of course you have a stereo in, stereo out, and need to place it somewhere as you like. But this 3D reverbs can handle or can use the original position in the room for starting the reverb process. And the internal aux buses of Pyramix offer the same channel count which is used in the bus itself, where the plugin is hooked into. So the two 7/7 aux buses are stereo, and this Symphony 3D aux bus is a 714 bus, and based on the source signal and panning, you can see here this blue is the input signal of the reverb, and you see that it gets information on the input on different kind of the room, and is also feeding out, of course, a 714 reverb. So a combination of this is, in my opinion, quite handy to use, especially the Symphony and also the other 3D reverb from Exponential Audio could be used very good, because yeah, it's a cool reverb. Is there anything else we especially need to dive in? Yeah, we have this the reverb handling and of course additional room positioning, like delays, like the halo upmix, like maybe a stereo signal which should get a dedicated reverb only to get it positioned maybe only on the rear speakers, and that's it. So you're free to experiment a lot with those kind of music. Especially this electronic music is a perfect playground for experimenting with 3D audio, because you don't want to rebuild a real let's say a real concert hall in which a maybe string quartet has played in the front of the audience. No, we don't have this in this case. We can just try to position everything where we think it's nice to have it, and it offers a lot of possibilities. It offers you a lot of space in the room. You don't have to push all instruments on this 60 degree angle in front of you. It makes life a lot of easier to get sources better recognized. It is very interesting on dedicated sources to use movements. So we had a kind of signal. Just let me remove this mixer here.
couple questions. Maybe
Okay.
before you dive in, we had a couple questions on if you could briefly also show the renderer and show how you connect it
Yes.
to the
Yes.
renderer.
Of course we
So
can.
maybe you can bring your your presentation to that side of the connection.
Let's show it with this kind of track here.
Okay.
The renderer, where's my renderer gone? It was connected this way, but it is gone. So we have to connect it again. Yes.
Yeah, maybe for the
please.
audience, because obviously the renderer is running on a Mac, so it's a Mac only software. So it was running on a Mac that is basically next to the Pyramix workstation. And I think one person in the audience had the question about the audio connection. I guess it's a Ravenna driver, right?
Yes,
so,
yes. You can see here on the settings of the Atmos renderer, I am using the core audio of Merging, which offers 128 tracks of Ravenna audio in and out. I have defined that my LTC timecode source is also an audio signal, which is coming on track 64. And that's what I have to set up here, getting the Ravenna configured as the audio device. In Pyramix, we have the Atmos Connect window we have seen before on the little slides. This one is open through the mixer, and here's the IP address of the renderer, which you can see on the preferences page under remote clients. It offers you the IP of the Ravenna network and also the IP now of our internet network here. That one is normally for this internal studio network we use, and then we have that dedicated network connection for the renderer. And not that one. So we have this Atmos Connect. You just have to click this button for connection, and then it says it is connected. As soon as it is connected, you see that these balls are colored in blue. That means Pyramix is configured on those tracks to send some kind of objects which have been set up before in here through these object tracks. So this is the signal going into the renderer. Through this IP connection, the metadata would be sent. And now if you play back a file here, you can see those sources or this audio coming in here in the renderer. Let me get that one, remove this solo. And you can see here some action on the bed, which is just a 7-1 bed in this case, and this 4 channels for the height. We have these 8 channels plus these 2 for the additional 714FX bus. And all other blue balls here are independent objects. You can see here those independent objects moving around in the renderer, which is corresponding to the same movement in the panner of Pyramix. So that panner is showing here. So I did this kind of fast movement in the panner. And this is corresponding to those balls here in the renderer as well. I can quickly show you the audio connections I have done. That is, it's too much windows open here. We go there. So my audio over IP connection is done through the audio network manager from Merging, which is seeing all the Ravenna devices in the network. So we have the Anubis, our monitor controller. We have the Windows workstation with the Pyramix. We have the Mac with the core audio driver, and we have the Harpy here, which is our DA converter. As well, here are some other machines. These are machines which are not active right now, or another Anubis in the other room for listening purposes. And audio connection is done from the Pyramix system to the Mac. featuring 48 channels plus the timecode track. And the return from the Mac is done to our system for listening. This is here. The Mac player is a 12 channel input from the Mac renderer here, from the Atmos renderer, and we also add the two channels of binaural stereo and get this to the Anubis. So we can listen to the output of the renderer in 714. We can listen to some kind of down mixes from the renderer. We can listen to the stereo binaural information, and of course we can listen to the outputs of Pyramix itself. So we have these bunch of sources here, the Mac player and our Pyramix with a 714. Here we have the stereo binaural setting, and yeah, that's how we connect the systems with each other, get the audio in both directions, and listen to all that.
I think that was a pretty extensive answer. We have about 15 other questions, so
yes, next one will be shorter.
Let's see. But this was covering a few subjects actually, so
yeah,
some people were asking in this direction. So generally speaking, we have quite some questions. Let's try to get through most of it. Otherwise, the other questions are actually not lost. So GoToWebinar is smart enough to give me the questions afterwards. So even if we don't get to your question, we will follow up via email in that case. But let's see. I mean, we just spend like another 15 minutes or some time. So there was two questions asking about the binaural. If you could briefly talk about the binaural metadata, and probably connected to this also your experience. How did it translate for you? How did that binaural actually work for you?
It depends, of course, on the kind of mix you did. It depends on the headphone, I have to say. Closed headphones are working not as good as open ones if you are talking about real headphones. In-ears are also working fine, because if you're using an in-ear, you don't have additional reflection from which you have on a closed headphone. So audio is fed to the ear and is reflected from the ear itself back to the closed headphone, and so this is the bad thing on the closed headphone for that purpose, because this binaural thing is trying to model your body or some kind of a general body in the room to get the information fed the right way to your ears. And I think you should spend some time to play around with this binaural render mode setting. So what I normally do is that my main signal, especially on the front, is not using any kind of additional binaural render mode settings. As more as you go to signals which are room information, or which are reverb, or which are sources which are placed maybe very much in the height, you can use those settings here which are off, near, mid, and far. So the rendering for headphone takes care of the setting and tries to get a better result for a far distance signal if it is using this far setup. What exactly is done internally, you could answer better than me, but I guess that of course binaural information or binaural rendering is done with some kind of creating or placing a source in some kind of a room model. And if you're using the farm mode, the room model which is used for that is a larger one. So you see that my reverb effects are using the mid and the far settings. I have some other objects which don't use any kind of binaural rendering, but others which are some effects or some voices which should be just some kind of a ghost voice or something like this, which use those far settings. And I think it is important to take care of this and play with this to get a good result for the headphone.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, actually, it's quite interesting. I see a lot of times, especially when it's about electronic music, things where really the beat is important. I feel that quite often people are putting certain things to off to get that directivity and punch of certain rhythm elements. So I think you came to the same conclusion as others, and then setting near, mid, and far to kind of shift your other instruments around, and especially putting reverb stuff on far is something I've also always do a lot, because it kind of emphasizes this effect. And
I think
cool. Thank you very much for showing the settings.
I think very important on this binaural render mode settings is that this is only used for headphone binaural playback. Those settings don't affect any kind of playback which will be done through loudspeakers. That is important to know. So this binaural render settings don't mess your mix you did on speakers for speakers. It is only for a better representation on headphones using the binaural rendering. And this is something what all the sound engineers should take care of, I think, more and more and more, and it would become more important. And a good
really very important point. You're right.
Yeah.
So by changing anything in this page, you change absolutely nothing on how your mix will sound on speakers. So they only take into account for binaural headphone playback.
And only during the rendering of this file. There's no EQing or whatever done on the sources, on the audio files which are part of the Atmos signal. This is very important to know.
Yeah, that's right. We have one longer question from Anthony, who was asking after your considerations for playback on fewer on scenarios that have fewer speakers. So did you consider what happens in home theaters that have less than 714, and probably even taking it to the extreme, did you look at mono compatibility? Maybe not, but
to be honest, I don't look into mono compatibility.
But stereo, you do check 2.0, I guess.
Yes, of course, I check the stereo. I also check the other down mixes offered by the renderer. So the renderer itself can do a, let's say, 512 down mix into 51 down mix into 40 down mix and a stereo. This all will be done by the renderer for you for listening purposes, the same way as an AVR will do it at home at the client's living room. So this is an important feature where you could check the sound of your mix on other setups. It would be also very very handy, I think, to, if you have the chance, to compare that stuff on a soundbar, how it is performing on a soundbar. So yes, but more for an artistic reason, not for a technical one. So I'm not taking care of mono compatibility. If anyone want to listen to mono, they should not use the Atmos source. I think that makes no sense. And especially when we are talking about Blu-ray, there's a dedicated stereo mix in most cases, and in a lot of cases there's a dedicated 5.1 mix. So for those clients using speakers, it might be better to use those dedicated mixes instead of a down mix of the Atmos. This is also something what you should know about.
Yeah, that's especially for music. I mean, for music, it's
yes, yeah, of course.
Dedicated music. Stereo is still a holy thing. I mean, for audiovisual content, actually, very often the people only put the Atmos mix on the disc and rely on the automatic down mixes. Because there was one quick question. Any reason why you use Pyramix native and not Mass Core?
Both is running here, and when I started this project, I had some issues connecting the Moskau to the Mac. So at that case, and for that reason, I switched over to the native mode. So far, I did both. I have used both modes. What is important to know on the Moskau mode is, of course, it has a very, very short latency, which is interesting for recording sessions, but it is not really important for mixing. Based on this, if you're running a lot of plugins, especially some reverbs or some reverbs which are using folding techniques, need a longer kind of buffer size to get the processing done. Pyramix is famous in that case that it has the possibility to really use all the cores the system offers. So if I have an 8-core system featuring 16 cores, you can see here we have only 14 because the other one is used by Moskau, and it can use all those cores and will split the audio to that one which is free at the moment. And I have used, especially using the Moskau stuff, the dedicated possibility of using VST plugins compared to VS3 plugins, which is the internal format of Pyramix, because this is processed internally one after the other, and you can let's say configure your CPU usage in that way. So I have this flux channel in both versions as a VS3 plugin as well as a VST plugin, just to be able to move that one to the processing on the Moskau layer or on the native layer. But in this case, on this mix, I have used the native mode.
Cool.
It's
I think we almost have not many more questions. One little technical question. Do you automate the object bus sends, or do you send a whole channel for the total length of the show?
There was one track which have been mixed into the master bus mainly all the time, and only at the end that track gets some movement and has been switched to an object bus at that time. So yes, I have used those automation, but only once or twice in this mix, and it's an object or part of the main bus, but it's possible to do both.
Okay, cool. And I think Tom asked, how does it sound? So I think it's probably a good question to basically ask you about as a final question, about your experience with mixing that content in Atmos and what you really feel about it. And probably you can even hit play for a brief second.
I probably can hit play even if we are officially not allowed to do so due to license reasons, but I can mute one track and then it's not the original, so maybe like this. But the idea is that mixing this kind of music in surround is a totally different than stereo, and the result is a totally different one. And for me as a sound guy, of course, I'm totally freaky with 3D because it's an amazing thing, and I think this is the most important development of the last 25 years or something like this. There's now there's some rumor in the audio industry, there's some new format, there's some really interesting new we could deliver to the client, and that makes it interesting when you will get some people in here to listen to this which are not audio profis. So they are sitting here and just listening to the 3D, and when I switch back to stereo, they're sitting, oh, I don't need that one. Yeah. I just want to have the one before. So of course I have to say it is amazing. And of course we have fed the binaural render output to the system here. So maybe I can play just a short piece here. I don't know how this is really sounding at your end through the internet. But
that's sometimes a problem because the streaming, the webinar providers do some kind of processing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Always the risk. But anyways, the Blu-ray is available and sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And you can see here we are now getting also some movement in the audio here, what we can listen to. Did you fed it to the audience? It's playing. Oh no, sorry.
Oh, I think you have to enable. You have to enable it.
That one.
Yeah.
Ah, here we go. So this is a source which is just moving quickly around in the room, which you can see here. This is all manual panorama. Or on this part here. from the front to the rear and also passing through the room, one source before you and the other one behind you. So
seems like, unfortunately, GoToWebinar is only mono transmitting, which is unfortunate. But even in mono, I have that feeling that I just want to hear this in a three-dimensional space because the music lends itself so well to it. So probably you all can go and buy the Blu-ray and listen to it. Sorry for that, but yeah, it seems like this is only mono. It's probably also a question of bitrate. So depending on your system, probably you get mono or stereo, something we cannot control right now.
And when there's an additional codec, it may be get rid of all that stuff which is important for the binaural information, which is thought as unimportant for the codec. So
I think the basic idea is that you can do so many things with the electronic music, especially this kind of music in a three-dimensional space. So
but of course you have to say, even if it's not in electronic music, if it's just jazz or just a rock band, just getting some instruments fixed, positioned out of the front to the rear or a little bit to the top makes it much more obvious to listen to everything. We did the Westernhagen, the last Westernhagen album, which was also having a Atmos track. We haven't mixed the Atmos track, but we did the authoring, and it started with a stereo, and I have listened to the stereo 3 or 4 or 5 times before we received first time the Atmos stream. And when I listened to the Atmos, I said, okay, I haven't heard this before. And then I went back to the stereo mix and said, okay, yeah, it is there, but it didn't come to your mind. While in the surround space or in the immersive space, it is obvious to position some sources anywhere, and you will get a much more interesting listening experience, in my opinion.
I think we're out of time. I think we have a handful of questions we couldn't get to, but we will get to those through email, so that's probably fine.
Yes, of course. Just you can get me in there, and I can also try to answer some of the questions afterwards.
Maybe a last one. Maybe if we can make it in 2 minutes. There was one question here about the Dolby Atmos virtualization and the virtual room function in the Pyramix mix bus. Or is this a question for 2 minutes?
Pyramix has 2 different modes. It can use as in a dedicated channel-based mode where you just select a setup like a 5.1 or a Dolby 714 or any other kind of format which is predefined with positions of speakers, and then the panner acts as a panner which is placing the signals in that room. Pyramix also has the ability to let you create your own room. This is mainly done for presentations or events, something like this, where you have a dedicated set of speakers anywhere, and you can exactly define where those speakers are and what distance they have to your listening space. I haven't used that one because I want to mix Dolby Atmos, that is 512 or 714 or whatever. I'm just using panning and reverbs and delays and upmixer for getting this room information. Yeah.
I'm muted. Okay, cool. So I can only say thank you very much. I found this very interesting actually, and we had a very good audience rate, so almost everybody stayed until the end and got interested questions. So thanks very much also to the audience.
Many thanks from my side as well. Thank you.
So I had a lot of fun, and there should be a replay available, so everybody who signed up for this should also get a notification about the replay. This might take a day or 2, but you would be able to see it as a video on demand or share it with somebody if you think it was interesting. And besides, thanks a lot for watching. I shared this QR code in the earlier, which also allows you to contact Dolby. So on this website, you're also able to reach out to us. And yeah, all the best for mixing Dolby Atmos. And thanks again, Harald.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks.
Bis zum nächsten Projekt.
Ja, gerne. See you.
Okay, everybody. Cheers.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bist du noch online? Wir sind raus. Übertragung beenden.
Ich bin noch da. Wenn du magst,